Welcome to the Make Your Mark podcast. Hey everyone, I'm Mark Moyer, author of Win Again, speaker, career coach, and business advisor. And I help athletes, executives, and entrepreneurs reach their fullest potential. What you're going to be hearing in every single episode are conversations with athletes and other sports-related influencers. And we'll be offering you the insight that you need to succeed in life, including advice that will let you jump past your competition, whether it be for a great new job or taking your business to a much, much higher level. Make sure to connect with me on social media at Mark Moyer Coach and go to my website, markmoyer.com, to get access to the tips and strategies that my coaching clients get directly. If you're looking for ways to make your mark, send me an email to mark@markmoyer.com and I'll get you going right away. Thanks for joining me today. It's going to be an awesome episode. Now, are you ready to make your mark? Let's do this. Hey everyone, welcome to the Make Your Mark podcast. My name is Mark Moyer and I'm broadcasting you live from New York City. And I'm thrilled to have you from wherever you're listening, whether it's here in New York, anywhere else in the United States, Canada, Mexico, overseas, underseas, wherever you are, thrilled to have you. And I'm in a great mood because I just spoke with Lauren Walsh. And Lauren is one of the top brand experts and marketing people for athletes. I mean, she is great. And her company, LW Branding, wait till you hear about what they're doing and how they're really taking players and their careers one step forward. But before we jump into that, thanks for listening on whether it's on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, wherever you're listening to this. Please leave a review. Please subscribe. Would love to hear from you. Send me an email to mark@markmoyer.com and go onto my website, markmoyer.com, to listen to previous episodes. They're all great. But before we jump into those, listen to this one. You're going to really enjoy hearing from Lauren Walsh. Happy listening. So I'd love to welcome my guest today on the Make Your Mark podcast, Lauren Walsh, and she's hailing from
Chicago,
the second city. But I think she thinks it's the first city, of course, right?
Of course it is. Come on.
Of course. But amazing comedy there, some great steaks, great jazz music, and blues especially. What else do we have in Chicago? Are there any teams there? Or?
There's a few. I think the Cubs are still making a run for it these days. Obviously, you know, we've got Jabari Parker back in Chicago, so Bulls fans are excited. And I don't know if you watched the Bears game on Sunday, but Khalil Mack, he's proving what you get when you pay $100 million for a player.
Yeah, well, just $100 million is just that's a crazy amount, but it's it gets people to sit in their seats, I guess, right? That's the whole point. Fill up the stadium. But what I'd love to talk to you about today, Lauren, is sort of a few different things. You've got an amazing start to your career, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And we'll also talk about LW Branding, your company that you're running now. But maybe first of all, tell me a little bit about how you think the public's perception is of, I mean, you just mentioned one of these players getting $100 million. And the public, when they hear that, it's a number that's, it's completely, it's insane, right? I mean, it's, 100 times what someone might earn even in a lifetime. So what are those players, do you think, not just doing with that money, but what else is important? I mean, it used to be, back in the 50s, 60s, you played, but then you had a second job. Then it developed into you earned enough money that you didn't need that second job, but you just kind of played and maybe you showed up at the local mall for a few autograph signings. But what are players having to do now, do you think, that to make them sort of stand out and be more marketable?
It comes down to building a brand. I mean, there's so much more to it these days because the reality is when you go and play a professional sport, or even, it's very similar to people like us being entrepreneurs. You never want to have to go back and have any sort of 9-to-5. And so what it comes down to is building a solid brand that allows you to carry on into the next phase. And the reason, people are probably wondering, why do you keep using this word brand? I know these days it can be such a buzzword, but The reality is that when you build a brand, you allow yourself to take your personal story, basically who you are, who you show up to, to the world, and then you get to make money off of that. And, it sounds a little crazy, but that's what these athletes are doing. They're figuring out the way to leverage who they are, where they came from, what they're known for, and then make money off of that for the rest of their lives. Because yes, $100 million is a ton of money and way more than most people will earn. However, this is what they're earning now, and it has to carry them out throughout their entire lives. And also at the same time, it goes off of the fact that what else are they going to do? Like they have their name, they have all this, but they also may not want to work. It's such a grind sometimes to be a professional athlete that when you get done, maybe you want to take a little bit of time off. So they need to be setting all that up now to be able to carry themselves into that next phase.
Well, and so it's amazing how you know all this stuff. You must have a company that does this sort of work, don't you? So we're going to talk about that in a minute, but take me back to your college days. You graduated Purdue, but while you were at Purdue, you were involved in some mentoring. Tell me a little bit about the mentoring and why you got into that and how it's sort of led to what you do now.
Yeah, so I was a cheerleader at Purdue all 4 years. And so as most people will know, within the athletic community, it's very tight knit. So my close friends were always, of course, other cheerleaders and then the athletes. And so I was always on the other side of things. And when I say the other side, I mean the interpersonal side, the side of not being a fan. So right. I knew these athletes as individuals. And even at the college level, there's huge fans, people asking for these guys, guys and girls autographs all the time. So I was always on that side of it. I was always intrigued by it. I remember a few times being like, why do you want my friend's autograph? At the end, I'm like, he's kind of weird. Do you know what he's like? But it's funny. So I was always on that side. And then I started working with one of the mentors at the time, and her role was just to mentor a few of the football players. Okay. I loved it. I just loved what she was doing. I saw how much of an impact she was making in these student athletes' lives. So then I ended up reaching out to the football department, and after I graduated and was no longer a student athlete myself, I got hired to be a mentor. So my role was that I oversaw 2 individual players, and so we met generally about 3 times a week. Outside of meeting with them, I would also sit down and meet with their position coaches, check in and make sure that everything on the field was working out. We'd also meet with their tutors and then check in with the class checkers. So it was like, are they going to class? What are their grades like? Are they being respectful? Is everything going well on the field? And it was to make sure that everything just kind of aligned.
Wait a second. You said class checkers. So there are actually people that are checking to make sure these athletes go to class. Yeah,
there are. So it's obviously someone who's already in the class, but their role is actually to make sure that they show up to that class. Yeah. Yeah. So if they don't, their position coach already knows before they get to practice.
Whoa. Okay. Well, that's a good way to hold them accountable.
Yeah, which usually means a 6 a.m. workout the next day, but we won't get into that.
I'm sure they love those. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you were a mentor. How long did you do the mentoring?
So I did it for about 2 years.
Okay.
And it was also one of the individuals I was working with. I'll never forget. We were sitting there talking about one of his classes, and I asked some general life question, and he kind of looked at me and had no idea what I was talking about. And I was like, wait a minute, back up. You know nothing about this. And that is honestly when the light bulb went off, when it's nothing to do with that he's not intelligent or that he didn't have the schooling. Obviously, he was going to Purdue as well. He made his way there. The reality was that he had spent so much of his life focused on football that some of the general life skills that someone like me took for granted, he just didn't have. And it was honestly at that point that I decided at some point in my life, I am going to make this into a career, and I'm going to make it a passion to help athletes leverage this platform to become amazing people and not just be known as a football player.
Well, that's amazing you say that, because in terms of some of the coaching that I do with the athletes I work with, you're absolutely right, Lauren. There's so many of them that they're not necessarily unintelligent. They just simply haven't been exposed to certain things that you said we take for granted. And, for example, one of the guys that I spoke with, he was a retired hockey player, but he was intimidated by even being on LinkedIn simply because he said, well, I'm not I'm not a top level executive, so I can't be on there. And I said, no, you don't understand. Everybody's got to be on there, and you should be on there also. And we walked through all that. And that's what eventually led to him getting a job. But it's something where I agree. These athletes, once they're given certain bits of information that they didn't know, they're going to be so far ahead of the others that don't get that information. So I think it's great that Purdue's doing that sort of a program, because it's something that I think has been lacking for a long time. These athletes, they eat, live, breathe their sport, from, as you said, 6 a.m. to midnight, and barely get some sleep. and they don't necessarily get shown anything else. So that's great. So you were a mentor for a while, and then what made you that one morning wake up and say, LW branding, let's do it?
I had continued, actually, I maintained contact with two of the individuals that I did mentor. They actually both ended up in the NFL. And then at the same time, there was just a bunch of guys that I'd gone to school with who'd ended up in the NFL and NBA. And they'd randomly text me or call me for advice on things.
Oh, yeah?
And so finally one day I'm like, hold on. Okay, if I was a mentor in college, there has to be some sort of need to have some sort of mentor when you're in the NFL. I obviously knew that there were agents, but I was like, there has to be someone else. And then at the same time, I'm like, if I'm getting calls, obviously there's a need. And obviously, it just shows that they trust me.
Right.
So that's when it happened. And honestly, it was more of, this was always in the back of my mind. I always knew I'd impact athletes. It was more of the fact that I finally decided to make the leap to start a company, because I think it's too bold. It's so scary to do both. But even though I had a passion, I didn't know how to run a business, but it was actually more so I was working at an amazing corporation and working for an awesome CEO who ran this organization where people loved going to work every day. And he showed me how you could take a passion and turn it into a dream and then build a company off of it and be profitable. So it was kind of those two coming together while I was actually in corporate America when that light bulb went off.
Oh, that's great. So what was it like to like when you finally launched it? I'm sure you were on one hand exhilarated and excited and fired up, but then on the other hand, you're like, oh my God, what am I doing? I mean, oh my God, this is crazy, right? So
completely,
What was the first big success, the first big moment?
So the funny thing is we actually started on the fashion side of things. So the name of the company when I actually started was LW Styling. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know if I've ever said this publicly, but I did it on purpose because I knew that it was going to be hard to break into the world of sports. Okay. So I knew that that it was, one, competitive. Two, obviously there's not a lot of females. And three, people already had their quote unquote people who managed all their stuff. So I started in that aspect of it. I'd reached out to one of my friends who was playing in the NBA. He introduced me to his agent, and I made this guy have coffee with me once a week for 2 months. I'm not even kidding. One time I showed up and he was like, so what do you want to talk about? I said, I just wanted to say hi so that whenever you have a client, I'm the person that you call. And finally, I'm like, listen, I've put in the work. You know me, you trust me. And so he said, all right, look, I'm setting up a meeting. I'm not giving you a referral. I'm not telling him anything about you. Okay. I'm just telling you where to be and when. I'm going to tell you to go meet him. Okay. And then hopefully it goes well. And he set it up. I went and met that individual. He was in Chicago training for the NBA. And it just so happened that he ended up getting drafted number 15 and in the draft that year. So it worked out. But it was honestly, just a whole lot of networking, leaning on the relationships that I had from college, and then kind of just hoping that something was going to come to fruition.
Well, that's great. And so you got him as a client. So what did you start doing on his behalf? What sort of, because look, obviously it's been a few years now, and you've, I'm sure, hit your stride, and every day you're sort of really fine tuning what you offer. But when you this first player, what were some of the things you started doing for him?
Yeah, so the first thing was spent the week in New York leading up to the NBA draft. Okay. And so it started with, I was like, look, I'm going to make your life as easy as possible. Obviously, I'll pick out your clothes. I have a couple companies who are willing to give us some clothes for free. You can wear those all week. But I'll also take it a step further, and I'm going to know your schedule so that you don't have to think about it. So you don't have to worry about where I need to be, what am I wearing, what am I saying? Okay. I'll do it all for you. So it started with that. Literally, like I said, it was kind of a combination of like a stylist / personal assistant. Right. And then as I did it, I remember, there was a phone interview. And so a few minutes before, he's like, okay, I think this is what we're going to talk about. And we just kind of had a conversation. We talked about it. And he was like, okay, now I feel better, and then he had his phone interview. And so a lot of it was starting in one area and then building on it. Because then after the draft, I still remember when he called me, he's like, okay, I could not have survived New York without you. So we need to figure out a way to continue to have a relationship and make this work. And somehow I need to hire you. He's like, I don't know how or how this works or any of that, but I know that I need to hire you because I know that you did add value and make my life easy while we were in New York.
Wow, you didn't need to sell him then. It was already, he was sold already. That was great.
I think
Good
that's
for
the
you.
best way to do it, though. I mean, obviously it's all referral, but at the same time, it's like, it's not about the sales pitch. It's not about me saying, oh, I'm so good at this, or I can do that. It's about showing, and especially in the world of professional sports. I mean, it's just like, these guys nowadays, they want you to show them how much you care about them by giving them the big contracts and the guaranteed dollars. But that's what it is. It's show them where you add the value, and then everything else can fall into place.
Now, did you find that at any point were you thinking, wow, I hope I'm not overextending myself by sort of overpromising what I can do? Or did you just kind of keep up with it? What was?
No, honestly, I just held my breath and ran as fast as I could because I knew that this was a once in a lifetime opportunity. I mean, this is someone who I literally, almost randomly got introduced to, and now, was getting drafted to the NBA and all that. So there was honestly no time to stop and think like, okay, do I know what I'm doing? How am I going to make this happen? What am I going to charge? I mean, I'll be totally honest. I didn't stop and do any of that until probably even almost like a year later, to figure all that out.
But did you, when you were doing this work for me, so you were handling some of the styling stuff, but you're also doing almost like being his assistant, but it almost sounded like you were kind of doing a lot of stuff that an agent's supposed to do, right? Or not really?
Well, but here's the thing. It comes down to what the expectations are of your agent. Right. There are agencies who are full service. Right. There are agencies who even have assistants, there are agents who will give you an assistant who literally helps you do everything. I remember I got an assistant one time, or an assistant called me from one of the huge agencies and was like, one of the players had just gotten traded. And she's like, I need to get blinds. Did you know how to do that? And I was like, because of who he was, and now today he's like one of the biggest names in the NFL, I was like, I'll help you do this. Right. But I was like, am I really helping you pick this out? So there are agencies who do that, but at the same time, there are other agencies where they kind of let the player navigate a little bit. I think that sometimes there's a big misconception with agents. The reality is that the agent works for the player. The player doesn't work for the agent. Right. So it also comes down to them setting some boundaries. And the way that we had set it up, obviously his agent was negotiating his contract. They were handling all of his endorsement deals, but there were other little things that he was like, I just trust you. And I feel like it's easier to send you a text than to reach out to them. And
order some blinds.
Right. And I'll be honest, with this client that I'm talking about, I did help him get temporary blinds in his place. I know. That's
great. But you know what? I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's a lot of times we do what we have to not just to necessarily satisfy the clients, but, I think a lot of it's about, there are boundaries to what we can and cannot do. And we've talked about this before, Lauren, but sometimes it is super hard to say no, especially if you're trying to rationalize. If you're a business person, you're thinking, well, will the no be good for business or bad for business? Well, if by saying yes, will it lead to greater success, or will it just lead me down to another bright, shiny object or something else going on? So that's great. So you mentioned earlier that when you first started, you said, well, geez, I'm young and I'm female, and it's tough to break in, especially into the athletic world like that because of that. But are there lots of now? I mean, has the momentum shifted a little bit, or are you still one of the few women that are doing this sort of work in sports?
Oh, it's still male dominated. I mean, I think it's something that it may always be like that. Now, I will say we are starting to see more power players on the female side. Like, I know, Kim Miali over at Rock Nation is one of the most successful agents. I don't even want to say female agents. I just mean agents in the NFL world. Right. So we're seeing more and more of it. And I've been getting a lot more females reaching out to me saying that they're looking to get into this industry. So I think maybe eventually we'll see more. I'll be honest, I really don't think we'll ever see a shift where it's going to be equal. It's just, I think it's one of those things that it may always be male dominated. However, there are a lot more opportunities for females to have a seat at the table.
Oh, well, that's great. And I mean, I'm assuming, but you tell me otherwise, wouldn't Do you feel that female athletes might have a preference towards having female help with this, or not necessarily?
I don't think so, because I think it's the same. It's like a personal preference. I mean, think about like a doctor, there's some people, or even like I was thinking about masseuses, like it's like, think about those types of things. It's just total personal preference of, what it comes down to.
True.
And I think it also comes down to how you were raised. Like, this is also what I tell people. A lot of times there are male athletes who actually resonate more with me than they may with their male agent, because they were raised by a single mom. So we have that connection. However, if there is an individual, whether it be male or female athlete, who was raised by a two-parent home, or even maybe raised by their father, they may be more inclined to trust a male over a female. So there's so many different layers that play into it.
But you know what? At the end of the day, I think that, and I've seen this in sports, I know you have, it is the referral thing, because especially in the world of athletic sports, because, if there's so many people trying to chase their money, so many vultures out there, right? So if you prove to be the one person that's really a stand-up person, that's who they can trust, they'll tell all their friends, their teammates, and so on, right? Is that a big part of your business? Is the referral thing, or is it? I mean, what do you have to do to get new business, or are you swamped as it is? What's the scoop?
We're always looking to grow. I mean, we have, a solid roster of clients right now, but my thing is, in addition to wanting to help a ton of athletes, I also want to inspire a ton of future individuals who want to work in the world of sports, and not just female, but it's hard to break in. So if my company can be a catalyst to help people create that career, I want it to be, but that means we have to grow so I can hire more people. But definitely referral. And I'll be honest, I have to remind our clients, I have to remind them that we do want more business, because the other thing is, sometimes they almost think, oh, well, I don't want you to be spread too thin. If you take on more clients, how accessible are you going to be to me? So I have to sometimes remind them, like, look, the more that we grow, the more that I can offer to you, and the more layers I can put into our company that makes us that much more successful, which will make you more successful. So it's always reminding them. And then I always think too, it's just a lot of relationship building. I mean, you may get introduced to someone today, like one of the agencies that we're now working with, I reached out to them and we started talking 3 years ago. We just signed a contract, I think 6 months ago. So I mean, that's 2.5 years worth of just building up the relationship. So there's so many sides to it, but I think the relationship kind of being at the right place at the right time. Obviously, it makes sense to be at the draft, be at the Super Bowl, be at NBA All-Star Weekend, and simply be there shaking hands and putting a face to the name, because the interpersonal connection is so important. Right.
Now, let's say I'm a student athlete and I'm going to be graduating next year, and I'm thinking about trying to go pro, but I'm not sure if I can make it and so forth. But what kind of advice can you give me on what I should, or maybe if there's anything I can start focusing on now while I'm still in college that can help me with post-graduation, however it shakes out?
Build your brand now. And so what I mean by that is figure out who you are. Like literally sit down, be with yourself, take out a notebook, whatever it is, figure out who are you? And then figure out, how do you want your authentic self to show up to the world? From there, you need to leverage the fact that you are playing, especially if you're someone who is a bigger name. You need to be posting on social media, because even if you're someone who ends up not going to the league, you could still be a college player who has 30, 40, 50,000 followers on social media, which can help you in the long run. At the same time, build up the professional side of things. Don't be afraid, to reach out to, whether it's within your major or within the booster club or whatnot, make contacts with the people who are running the local and national corporations, because again, they may want to meet with you now because of who you are. Down the line, whether you do make it to the league or not, let's say you don't, your name doesn't carry as much weight. So don't wait. Like, I get this a lot where people are like, oh, well, when I get to the NFL, then I'll work on my social media. Or, well, when I retire, then I'll build my brand. Well, guess it's too late. It's going to be way too late. So it's like, start to put in the foundation now and do it consistently. I mean, consistently with posting, with reaching out. Like, obviously I follow Purdue football a lot, but they're always sending their players to philanthropic events. Like I saw they delivered the game ball to a child who's ill, the other day. Do things like that. But when you're there, think big picture. Right. Who's there? Who's running the hospital that you're at? Whose hand can you shake when you're there? When you go to an alumni event or you get invited to something, who are the power players in the room? And can they get you a job? Or let's say you make it to the NFL. Can they be someone that you call, you give them 2 tickets, and maybe they do a $50,000 endorsement deal because you're the face of their company? But like, you have to be thinking big picture all the time.
That's great. Now, do you have a because you know what, I'm not maybe that bright and I don't really see the big picture. I'm I'm looking very narrowly at, maybe I'm still training so hard for my sport, or I just, maybe I'm hung up on, I love food. I love going out on dates. I love to, drinking, or I love doing whatever it is. And I'm not looking at the big picture. Do you have almost like a guide, like a big picture guide, or is that something that they just have to get when they sign on with you? And what's the best way for me to see that big picture?
Yeah, so I do. It's kind of tough. So I do have a guide, and I've reached out to, I will say at this point, we have reached out to every single D1 football program across the United States.
All right.
And because I actually have a separate company that actually Bryant McFadden and I own together called Project Ball, and it stands for Believe and Live Legendary. And it actually is specifically focused on helping college student athletes do this exact thing. Now, the thing is, as I also see a lot in the pro world, people want to keep things in-house. So we've reached out, we've mentioned our services, and a lot of them say, oh, we already have things like this. But of course, we don't see it happening. So long-term, there is a plan to make things like this more accessible. However, we also have to be careful, because at the same time, even though I'm not an agent, we still adhere to all of the NCAA guidelines that relate to student athletes.
Well, it's funny you should say that, Lauren, that one of my big beefs with a lot of the universities, and I run into the exact same thing, where I've reached out to them saying, look, the caliber of preparation the student athletes are getting for post-career, especially if they don't play, is really not that strong at all. It needs to be improved. They need to be better prepared. And, I've written a book about that. I've done, all kinds of articles about it. I've been on the NCAA website. I'm all over the place. But when I reach out to these people and I say, look, I'm happy to talk to you, advise you on some ideas, every one of them's like, nah, we got this. We're good. We got it. You're right. It's such an amazing, such a barrier to get past these people, because they all feel that they're delivering great content and advice, and they're not. The advice they give a lot of these players are, hey, just, if you don't make a team or whatever it is, just send your resume out, see what happens. I'm like, oh God, this is pathetic.
It's terrible.
How are they doing this? So,
well, and the other thing is that a lot of times, people don't realize this too, a lot of times the players don't always trust the internal people. I hate to break anyone's heart who's in that position, but that's the reality. So sometimes it actually also benefits to bring in someone like you or I, who's an outside source, because they're going to trust you just a little bit differently. Because I'm also a big believer in, jack of all trades, master of none. So if you're really good at football and building a football program, how are you really good at building a brand? Like, I'm not here sitting here telling you okay, I'm going to call the plays this Saturday or Sunday. But I think that's a big proponent of it too.
Well, that's great. And offline, we're going to talk about pairing up on this, because I think it's something that it's such a dire need, and not just for collegiate, post-collegiate, but I speak to a lot of Olympians, and the Olympians, when they, there's no professional judo league or professional water polo league or something, so they've trained their whole lives, and now they're like, oh, well, now what, right? So I think, I love what you're talking about, and I think that the whole notion of having some sort of a big picture guide for leaving is it's something that we'll work on it. Love to do that.
Yeah, I love it.
Because it's, just such a small, now I know that now let me take a step back before I assume anything. Is the majority of your clients, they're current athletes? Are they former athletes? What's the breakdown?
split right now. We're
Okay.
50-50 with
Okay.
current athletes. We have our current athlete roster is probably 75% rookie, and then 25% veteran. And
Okay.
then the other half of our roster are former NFL players.
NFL players, got it. Have you thought about, or is it too much to break into some of the other sports?
No, we've thought about it. The thing is, it's referral. We had a strategy meeting, it was just 2 weeks ago, where we actually sat down and looked at what are some of the underserved markets where maybe some people are going after and how do we target them? Obviously, there's a lot. I mean, there's things like, obviously, the WNBA, a lot of those females are not making as much as NBA players, but there are still opportunities off the field, especially because of how much of a need there is for strong females within the sports industry to come out and speak to the next generation.
Right.
Obviously, there's things, we know that golf makes, some of the golfers are actually make the most money in terms of endorsement deals. Obviously, Olympians, I know you work with a lot of Olympians. So we're always open, and that's where doing things like this is huge to be able to say this out loud, because behind the scenes we are having these meetings, but it's kind of the catch-22 between how do we rely on referrals and how do we let people know what we're doing without trying to sell? Because I never want to be that salesperson who's like, again, hey, look at me, we're so good at this. I love being able to show it and show how we can specifically add value to an individual to where they say, oh my gosh, how am I not working with those people?
Well, it's funny you should say that. One of the things that I always like to tell people is instead of selling, I always tell people don't sell yourself or sell your product, but instead allow them to buy. And what I mean by that is that there's a tendency for us as like me as maybe as a coach or whatever I'm trying to do from my side is I want to tell people all the, oh, this is all the things, this is all the great advice I'll give you. And they may say like, well, I don't really need that advice. So instead it's so important to find out what it is that the potential client really needs and wants. And then you feed them just that. Like, it's almost like this special of the day sort of thing instead of the whole menu. And, I think that especially with athletes, and I know you know this, they don't necessarily always know what they bring to the table. They don't really know how to present it. That's where obviously your expertise comes in. And so I've always been curious about this. With your clients, do you try to give them certain guidelines on what to maybe say or not say on social media? And,
yeah, we do. First, it comes down to we are very selective with who we work with. So if there is someone who I think is a loose cannon, who maybe I'm going to have to coach all the time on what not to say, they're actually not our ideal client, because the way that we run our company is that I encourage our clients to be themselves on social media, because there's nothing worse than when you see an inauthentic post. Like, when someone else wrote it, or when they're getting paid. It's so obvious.
Right.
And that, I just cringe when I see those things. So what we try more so to do is just be yourself. Like, don't second guess it. If you pick up your phone and you're trying to think of a good tweet, put your phone down, because whatever you come up with is going to be crafted. However, something happens, you think of an idea, you say something funny, and people laugh. Well, 5 people in the room laughed at you. I'm sure that there's 100 other people, let alone 10,000 people on Twitter who are going to laugh with you too. So it's more about, don't try to craft and create the content to put out there. Simply be yourself and understand that there is going to be a market for that. There's also going to be a market of people who don't like it. And that's okay at the same time. Like, you don't have to please everybody.
Very correct. I'm probably a prime example of that. Now, so I'm going to throw a few things at you right now. It's called the Hit Your Mark segment, but I'm curious about a couple of things, and I always like to go through this thing. I guess first and foremost, I want you to tell me, give me a very when you were at Purdue, one of the funniest things you saw or were a part of, whether it was a prank or a joke done or something that happened, as you were part of the whole, whether it was the football program or just the athletes in general. Give me something that was really funny that stands out in your mind, like a memory.
Oh my gosh. I'm trying to think of what I can say that's not going to give away anyone's secrets or anything. I will say that the Purdue Petes, the mascots at Purdue, are some of the most insane but hilarious people in the entire world. I can't go into too much detail because I think people may get in trouble if I talked about it, but they used to get rowdy on game day, and people didn't know, but there's like 3 or 4 of them actually. So they would take turns and they'd be running all over the place, but they would take these go-karts or like big, like golf carts, and like be just like running rampant around the streets of Purdue on game day. And they may have been a little intoxicated. I don't know if I should say.
That might be the first time someone's been intoxicated as a college student. So, but now, who do they actually report to, or do they report to anybody?
They're part of the cheerleading program. Yeah.
Oh, got it. All right.
It's an intense. Listen, let me tell you, they have to go through tryouts and they have to improv, and there's a lot that goes into it. So I give them a lot of credit. But they brought some of like just the funniest moments to what we would do.
Got it. And in terms of the people that you've tried to, well, let's say some of your clients and the people you've done business with, who do you think, are you ever allowed to say who you do business with or not really? Or is that something you try to guard?
Yeah, it depends. There are some that we guard because obviously for some we do handle their social media accounts. So I never want anyone to obviously be aware of that. But there are others that it's very open. Obviously, we put pictures up on our social media. We put pictures up on our website as well. So. Yeah. So
who do you think out of the ones you can talk about then, who's one of the the most popular guys on social media that you're working with, that, and it's not because of something controversial, but more so just always has funny anecdotes or things that happen that people love to see, family moments, whatever it is? Yeah.
There's a couple. So one of the guys that we work with through one of our other clients, so Jermichael Finley, kills it on social media because of the fact that Packers fans are so loyal. These Packers fans are just they would follow him anywhere. So it's funny to see how something so small that he puts out there. He also he's one of those who he doesn't necessarily care. He's not, doesn't care if he offends someone. So he's very just raw and authentic when he puts it out there. And we work with him on one of our clients has a sports media platform. So we work with him on that. So there's lots of social media involved.
Okay.
But it always accounts for also just insane reactions. But I think people also, when he does it, it's almost acceptable. It's like when he puts something out there that it's if someone feels offended or whatever, it's people aren't oh my gosh, he's such a terrible person. It's okay, he just tells it like it is, and we love him for that. So it works.
Well, that's cool. Now, now, if I asked you for 3 people you'd love to have a drink with today, who are either dead or alive, but any 3 people, who would you pick?
Number 1 is Oprah. I am
cool.
Her podcasts are life-changing. Number 1 is Oprah. Number 2 would be, I have to go with Kobe Bryant. I was a huge Kobe fan back in the day. I still have a Lakers jersey. I'm not gonna lie. And third, she's out there, but I would love to sit down and talk with USB Ponder. Obviously, she's a strong female in the world of sports. She's broke a lot of barriers, but she's also very open about being a Christian woman as well. And that's something that I strongly admire.
Oh, that's great. Good choices. Now, what is one thing about you that all these people I see wandering behind you, your coworkers, don't know about you?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think everyone knows that before I got into cheerleading that I was a really crazy competitive gymnast for 10 years. I actually was on track to go to the Olympics. But we got to the point where my coaches wanted me to actually leave high school and get a tutor so that I could train twice a day. Right. And it got to the point where I had to kind of make that decision, do I want to be a normal kid? Do I want to pursue this? And I actually decided to walk away from it.
Wow. So what was what was the strongest event?
I think vault was typically my strongest event.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I think people watch that and all we ever see are the, obviously the blooper films, right? Of the people that crash into it and stuff, but it's...
Oh my gosh, I crashed into the vault so bad. My family to this day still talks about sending it into America's Funniest Home Videos. I'm not kidding. I mean, it was legit, like jump on the springboard, head first into it. And you see my mom's holding the camera and you see it kind of shake real quick. But we still have to say, and the other thing is, you better believe that my coaches, this is how insane they were. After that, I had 2 more events. And I had to finish the meet after crashing straight into the vault. I mean, that was my life. And I was like maybe 12 years old. I mean, a kid. Like, it was intense. But
and you know what's funny is that the events in gymnastics have been the same for, I don't know, somewhere around 42 trillion years. I mean, there's always been the same events, right? But then you watch something like, what is it, Ninja Warrior, American Ninja Warrior, where they got all these crazy different things, right? And I always wonder, well, why doesn't the world of gymnastics switch and maybe, hey, we'll throw in the, like, whatever one of the crazy, those ladder things or whatever it is. I always wonder about that because it's been, again, the same, the vault. Like, who came up with the vault? Like, who thought, I'm going to go running towards this stationary thing, try to jump and do a flip over it? I know, that's crazy.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. I feel like there's just so much history to it, though. And, like, who doesn't love watching gymnastics when the Olympics are on? So it's like, you can't really.
And then you see the guys that are doing like the
rings, yes,
and their muscles are out there, and I'm like, I'll just have another beer and watch that some more. But I ain't gonna do that.
It's insane. I mean, there's a lot that goes into all. That's why those people, I respect them. I mean, I remember the Magnificent Seven. I mean, just back in the day when I was huge. I lived and breathed all of it.
Oh, that's great. Well, one of the things I like to talk about on this podcast, I mean, it's called Make Your Mark for a reason. I like to talk to people that are tied in with the world of sports that are really making an impact going forward. And I love what you're doing. It sounds like you are obviously immersed in not just doing this because it's a job and a business, but you obviously love doing it. And part of what you're doing, Lauren, is you're clearly helping athletes put out a much better image of themselves and really portray themselves as positive people, I guess, and ones that can continue to grow their brand over the course of their lives and not just while they're playing. But what's the best way if somebody wants to know more about what you do and what your company does and so on? What's the best way for people to get a flavor of that?
Yeah, I think our website, we went through and made sure that everything is very, very clearly portrayed on our website. So lwbranding.com. And then we're simply at lwbranding on all social media accounts. So obviously also being in that world, we're putting out a lot out there. We just started putting more on IGTV. So you can, we're giving a little bit more behind the scenes of what goes on in the office and everything.
That's great.
But those are going to be, the 2 good places to go.
That's awesome. Well, look, thanks so much for being on. I love hearing stories about people, especially entrepreneurs and especially younger entrepreneurs that are really making an impact. And I think you've really hit it big. I think you're going to find that there will be more and more women that get into this because of what you're doing. I think it's really great to see how you're, I guess, opening the doors for other people. So keep up the great work. You're doing a super job. And I look forward to seeing more, and we'll certainly try teaming up going forward.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, Mark. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Have a great rest of the day.
You too.
Thanks so much for joining us today on this episode of Make Your Mark podcast. The goal of the podcast is to help you find ways to make your mark, to succeed in life, and to jump past your competition. Be sure to leave me a review on iTunes and Stitcher, and subscribe to be the first to hear new episodes. If you're looking for ways to make your mark, send me an email, mark@markmoyer.com, and I'll get back to you right away. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.